Dr. Fix adjusted his atmospheric processor with trembling appendages as he prepared to address the Galactic Council. Behind him, the massive holographic display flickered with carefully curated images of Earth, each one selected over months of meticulous observation. The council chambers stretched above him, its crystalline architecture housing representatives from over 300 spacefaring civilizations. Today, they would all learn about his groundbreaking research on humanity. Esteemed council members, he began, his translator converting his harmonic tones into standard galactic common. As lead xenoanthropologist of the HFY science vessel Truth Seeker, I come before you with disturbing findings about the recently discovered human species. The chamber's soft ambient lighting dimmed as he activated the first hologram. Earth's blue sphere rotated slowly, highlighted by data streams that his team had collected over the past standard year. Our observation platforms have documented concerning behavioral patterns. Kvix manipulated the controls, zooming in on various urban centers. Humans exhibit extreme individualistic tendencies. They frequently defy established authority, ignore carefully structured protocols, and act on emotional impulses rather than logical imperatives. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The harmonious collective of the Pleiadians shifted their color patterns to shades of concern, while the crystalline Aldebarans refracted light and frequencies indicating distress. Kvix continued, satisfaction humming through his central nervous column. Observe this typical human interaction. The hologram shifted to show a ground transport collision in a place his data identified as Houston. Two humans emerged from their vehicles, gesturing animatedly. What Kvix didn't show was the scene that followed, both drivers helping each other exchange information, and a passing stranger stopping to make sure everyone was all right. Their history provides even more compelling evidence. He displayed carefully selected scenes from human historical archives. Time and again, they demonstrate a concerning focus on individual gain over collective benefit. In the upper observation ring, junior researchers are rewatched with growing unease. She had been part of the observation team, stationed on one of the smaller monitoring platforms. Her own data told a different story, but her concerns had been dismissed during mission briefings. She had seen humans run into burning buildings to save strangers, watched them form vast networks to help during natural disasters, and observed them share resources with those in need without expectation of return. Based on our comprehensive analysis, Kvix proclaimed, I must recommend that the Council carefully restrict human integration into galactic society. Their unpredictable nature and resistance to structured authority make them potentially disruptive to our carefully balanced civilization. The Council's chief administrator, a towering Centaurian named Angstel, leaned forward. Your reputation for thorough research precedes you, Dr. Kvix. Do you have evidence of how humans might react to distress situations? The galaxy can be dangerous for emerging civilizations. Indeed, Kvix projected new data streams. Our models suggest that humans would either ignore distress calls from non-human species or attempt to exploit such situations for personal gain. Their entertainment media frequently depicts scenarios of conflict with alien species, suggesting deep-seated xenophobic tendencies. Zeri's sensory tentacles coiled in distress. She had watched thousands of human entertainment narratives during her research. Yes, some depicted conflict, but far more showed hopes of peaceful contact, dreams of galactic cooperation, and scenarios where humans sacrificed everything to help alien species. The council chambers erupted in discussion. Kvix stood proudly, his reputation as the galaxy's leading xenoanthropologist secure. His warning about humanity would be remembered for generations. As the session concluded, Zeri slipped away from the observation ring, clutching her personal data core. Inside it were thousands of recordings that told a different story. Humans delivering supplies to elderly neighbors, emergency services working tirelessly during disasters, global relief efforts coordinating to help regions in crisis. But who would believe a junior researcher over the renowned Dr. Kvix? Little did any of them know, Events were already in motion that would prove just how wrong they were about humanity's true nature. Senior Medical Officer Lyra pressed her upper appendages against the cold surface of the medical transport's control panel, all four of her eyes fixed on the rapidly declining quantum core readings. The Maraxian vessel Healing Light shuddered around her, its usually pristine white corridors now bathed in the crimson glow of emergency lighting. Core stability at 28% and falling, announced First Engineer Tex, his scale-lined throat pulsing with stress. The containment field is barely holding. Lyra's secondary heart began beating faster, joining the rhythm of her primary one. In the cargo hold behind them, 40,000 doses of Centurion fever antidote were slowly warming above their crucial storage temperature. The colony on New Proxima had reported over 3,000 cases already, and without this medicine. "What about the Sktheri research station?" she asked, her translator struggling to maintain clarity through her rising anxiety. "They're only 2 light hours away." Communications Officer Pell swiveled in her suspension chair, her bioluminescent spots glowing a worried amber. "They're responding." But she hesitated, her tendrils curling inward. "They're advising us to avoid the nearby human space at all costs. They say humans are likely to either ignore our distress call or attempt to salvage our ship for parts." Another violent shudder ran through the ship, the lights flickered, and for a moment, the artificial gravity wavered. "Core stability at 22%, Tex reported grimly. "We have maybe 30 minutes before total failure." Lyra's tertiary brain ran the calculations while her primary and secondary brains weighed the options. The Sktheri were the galaxy's foremost experts on emerging civilizations. Their warning about humans had been broadcast across all major channels, but the nearest non-human assistance was 5 hours away at best. "Officer Pell." Lyra straightened her posture, a decision crystallizing across all 3 of her brain centers. "Broadcast an emergency signal on all frequencies, including human channels." Medical Officer Lyra. Pell's spots shifted to a deep purple of concern. "The Sktheri reports clearly state, the reports won't matter if we're dead, and thousands of colonists die from Centurion fever." Lyra cut in, surprising herself with her firmness. "Send the signal." The next 3 minutes felt like an eternity. The core continued its descent toward critical failure, and Lyra found herself wondering if the Sktheri had been right. Perhaps humans would simply. Multiple contacts. Pell's spots flashed bright yellow in surprise. 3 vessels just dropped out of FTL travel. They're human ships. The main screen activated, showing 3 vessels of varying sizes. Their designs were unlike anything in the Galactic registry, less elegant than Maraxian ships, more functional than aesthetic, with sharp angles and exposed hardware that would make any Centaurian architect faint. "This is Captain Chen of the Earth Medical Transport, Hope's Horizon." A voice came through in perfect Galactic common. "We've detected your quantum core destabilization. We have experience with similar systems and are ready to assist. Please share your shield frequencies." Before Lyra could respond, 2 more messages arrived. "Mining vessel Deep Rock Pioneer here. We've got spare quantum stabilizers if you need them. Research ship Curiosity's Child standing by. We have power cells charged and ready for emergency transfer." Lyra's 3 brains struggled to process this response. Not only had humans answered their call, but 3 separate vessels had diverted their courses to help, and none of them had mentioned payment or salvage rights. "Medical Officer," Tex called out, his scales now a pale shade of worry. "Core at 17%. We need to decide now." Lyra took one last look at the Sktheri warning flashing on her secondary screen. Then she reached out and opened a channel to the human vessels. "This is Senior Medical Officer Lyra of the Maraxian Transport Healing Light. We gratefully accept your assistance. We're also carrying urgent medical supplies that need to reach New Proxima within 40 standard hours." "Understood, Healing Light." Captain Chen responded without hesitation. "Let's get you fixed up and back on your way." Those people need their medicine. As the human ships moved into position around them, Lyra couldn't help but wonder what else the Scathuri might have gotten wrong about humanity. Captain Sarah Chen kept her voice steady as she coordinated with the other human vessels, but her mind was racing through contingency plans. The Maraxian ship's quantum core readings were worse than she'd initially thought. On her command deck's main screen, the healing light hung against the star-studded backdrop, its elegant white hull designed for beauty, rather than the practical redundancies human ships favored. Engineering team ready for transfer. Her chief engineer, Raj Patel, reported through the ship's comm. He'd already suited up with his team, their modified EVA suits adapted for working with alien technology. But Captain, these readings, we've never dealt with a Maraxian quantum core before. No time like the present to learn, Sarah replied, managing a small smile despite the tension. The mining vessel's stabilizers will buy us time to figure it out. The Deep Rock Pioneer had already moved into position, its sturdy frame dwarfing both medical ships. Its captain, a gruff woman named Mackenzie, kept a running commentary as her crew prepared the emergency stabilizers. "These babies have saved our hides in the Kuiper Belt more times than I can count," Mackenzie transmitted. "They're not pretty, but they work." On the research vessel, Curiosity's Child, Dr. Amanda Torres had been rapidly comparing the Maraxian core specifications with known quantum technologies. "Captain Chen, we've analyzed their containment field. It's similar to the Centaurian design we studied last year. We're sending you the modification protocols now." Sarah watched as her crew coordinated with the other ships without missing a beat. No one had even questioned diverting from their original courses. The Hope's Horizon was supposed to be heading home after a 3-month relief mission to the Pleiades colonies. The crew had been talking about the upcoming solar festival for weeks. "Engineering team, transferring now," Raj reported. The airlock camera showed him and his team crossing to the Maraxian vessel, carrying tools and equipment that hadn't existed 6 months ago. Human engineers had a habit of modifying everything they touched, much to the confusion of other species. Senior Medical Officer Lyra's voice came through, her translator conveying a mix of hope and anxiety. "The core is at 14%. The medical supplies, the stasis field is weakening." "Understood," Sarah responded. She opened a channel to all 3 human ships. "Listen up, everyone. Those supplies are needed at New Proxima within 40 hours. Failure isn't an option." The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity. Mackenzie's crew installed the quantum stabilizers while Raj's team, guided by Dr. Torres's analysis, worked to modify the containment field. The Maraxians watched in fascination as the humans improvised solutions that would make any standard engineer faint. "Core stabilizing, Tex," the Maraxian engineer announced with obvious relief. "Up to 32%, 40%. The stabilizers will hold," Mackenzie assured them. "But you'll need a proper dock for full repairs." Sarah had already been calculating travel times and distances. The Hope's Horizon was the fastest of the 3 human ships, equipped with the latest drive systems for emergency medical response. She opened a channel to Lyra. "Medical officer, our ship can reach New Proxima in 36 hours. We should transfer the supplies and—" "Captain," her first officer, David Kim, interrupted quietly. "The crew's families. The solar festival." Sarah glanced at the crew on her bridge. They'd already missed 3 holidays this year. The solar festival was the biggest celebration back home, and they'd been promised time off. But as she met their eyes one by one, she saw the same determination she felt. The crew of the Healing Light did everything right. She transmitted to all channels. They maintained their course as long as possible, trying to complete their mission. "We're not letting them down now." She paused, then added, "Any crew who wish to transfer to the other vessels for faster return to Earth." "Not a chance, Captain," her helmsman called out, followed by similar responses across the ship. "Well then," Sarah allowed herself a genuine smile. "Medical Officer Lyra, let's get those supplies transferred. My crew will show yours our cargo systems. They're not as elegant as yours, but they're fast." The Maraxian officer's translator took a moment to process before responding. "Captain Chin, the Scatheri reports never mention this aspect of humanity. Why would you delay your celebration to help strangers?" Sarah thought about the colony she'd visited, the faces of people who needed help, alien or human. Because someday we might be the ones sending out a distress call. And even if we're not, helping is what humans do. The Grand Nexus station hung in space like a luminous snowflake, its crystalline spires catching light from 3 different suns. In the station's bustling trade district, beings from 100 different species gathered at the famous Starfall Cafe, where stories spread faster than light itself. Today, the usual hum of conversation had taken on a different tone. At a corner table, Captain Lyra of the Healing Light sat surrounded by an eager audience, her 4 eyes bright as she recounted her experience with the human ships. "They didn't even discuss payment," she explained, her translator crystal pulsing with earnest energy. "The mining vessel used their own quantum stabilizers, expensive equipment, and when I tried to arrange compensation, their captain just laughed and said, 'Pass it on.'" A Centaurian trader's crystal matrix flickered with skepticism. "But the Scatheri reports—" "Look," interrupted a gruff voice. A Rigelian cargo pilot leaned forward, their armored exoskeleton gleaming under the cafe's ambient lighting. "Last week, my ship hit an unexpected debris field near the Horsehead Nebula. Cracked our main drive housing. Know who stopped to help? Human mining ship. They didn't just repair it. They reinforced it better than new. Wouldn't take payment either." Similar stories began emerging around the cafe. A Pleiadian scientist described how Earth universities had freely shared breakthrough research on gravity wave manipulation. An Aldebaranian medical coordinator spoke of human doctors volunteering during a crisis on their colony worlds. Near the cafe's observation window, Station Director Venix watched the growing crowd with all 3 of their sensory clusters fully extended. As the station's administrator, they had accessed the official Scatheri reports on humanity dozens of times. Yet the evidence mounting in their database told a different story. Their assistant, Binge, a human liaison officer recently assigned to the station, approached with the daily reports. "Director, you might want to see this." The data crystal displayed a curious trend. Human vessels were consistently deviating from their registered flight paths, burning extra fuel and time to pass near common trade routes and colony worlds. The pattern made no sense until Binge explained. "They're conducting wellness checks," she said, smiling at the director's confusion. "After that incident with the Maraxian medical transport, a lot of our captains started taking alternate routes just to make sure everyone in their sector was okay." "That seems inefficient," Venix observed, their middle sensory cluster pulsing with confusion. "Maybe." Binge shrugged. "But last week, the Star Wanderer found a Danubian scout ship with a failing life support system because of these inefficient routes. No distress signal. Their communications were down. The crew would have died if the humans hadn't checked on them." In another corner of the cafe, a young Andromedian researcher was showing footage from Earth's historical archives on their portable projector. The images contradicted everything in the Scatheri reports. Humans forming vast networks to help strangers during natural disasters, creating organizations dedicated to helping other humans and animals alike, risking their lives to save others without hesitation. Their entire culture has countless examples of this behavior, the researcher explained excitedly. They have ancient stories, myths, and legends all centered around helping others. They even have a human phrase for it, paying it forward. Director Venix watched as the stories continued to spread throughout the station. Their security feeds showed similar discussions happening in the diplomatic sector, the merchant quarters, and even the usually stoic engineering division. The galaxy was beginning to see a very different picture of humanity than the one painted by the Scatheri. As if to punctuate this shift, a new alert appeared in their feed. A human vessel, the Stellar Guardian, had just requested emergency docking. Their cargo hold was full of medical supplies, and they'd picked up fragments of a transmission about a possible epidemic in the Outer Rim colonies. They hadn't received an official distress call. They simply heard there might be trouble and came to help. Venix approved the docking request immediately. Perhaps, they reflected, the true danger of humanity wasn't their independence or unpredictability. Perhaps the real shock was how their simple acts of kindness could reshape the very foundations of galactic society. The warning came from a small human research station on the edge of the Carina Nebula. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been monitoring stellar activity when her instruments detected something that made her blood run cold. The nearby star, HD 93129A, was about to release a massive coronal mass ejection. This is Dr. Rodriguez of Earth Science Station, Stellar Watch broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. She transmitted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. We're detecting an imminent Class X solar event. 3 habitation rings are in the projected path. Estimated time to impact: 4 hours. In the Galactic Council's Emergency Response Center, the alert triggered immediate chaos. The habitation rings house over 2 million beings from dozens of species. Chief Administrator Nextel's crystalline form pulsed with rapid color changes as they processed the incoming data. Evacuation protocols suggest we need at least 6 hours to safely transfer the populations, a Pleiadian coordinator announced, their bioluminescent patterns showing clear distress. The Sktheri research vessel Truth Seeker is nearest to the area, another coordinator reported. They're requesting that we follow standard procedures and wait for proper authorization before. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Hope's Horizon. A new voice cut through the chamber. The same human captain who had helped the Meraxian transport weeks ago. We're already en route with our experimental shield technology. 7 other human vessels are converging on the location. Nextel's color patterns shifted to show confusion. Captain Chen, the Council hasn't authorized. With respect, Administrator, Sarah interrupted, we can discuss authorization after we save those people. In the first habitation ring, Curator Lurin watched in mounting terror as the emergency alerts flashed across their screens. The ring's shield systems were never designed to handle a stellar event of this magnitude. Around them, the ring's 30,000 residents were beginning to panic. Then the first human ship arrived. The Hope's Horizon looked tiny against the massive habitation ring, but it moved with purpose. 6 more human vessels emerged from FTL travel within minutes, each taking strategic positions around the rings. This is Captain Chen to all rings. Sarah's voice came through on all channels. We're deploying experimental shield harmonics. Our ships will create a protective barrier while you evacuate. Please begin moving residents to your central hubs. That's impossible. Dr. Fix's voice cut in from the Truth Seeker. Your ship's shields cannot withstand. Already done it once, Sarah replied. Titan Colony, Sol System. We lost 3 ships but saved 16,000 people. The shield modifications came from that experience. Aboard the Hope's Horizon, Sarah turned to her crew. This is volunteer only. What we're about to do. The shields will hold, but our ships are going to take one hell of a beating. We're staying. Her first officer, David Kim, spoke for the entire bridge crew. Similar responses came from the other human vessels. The solar storm hit like a celestial hammer. The human ship's shields blazed brilliant blue, creating a protective web around the habitation rings. Inside the barrier, evacuation ships darted back and forth, transferring residents to safety. On the Galactic Council's emergency channel, the human captains maintained a steady stream of communication, adjusting shield harmonics and power distribution on the fly. Their ships groaned under the stellar onslaught, but they held position. Ring 1 cleared. Ring 2 at 60% evacuation. Shield power at 40%, rerouting from non-essential systems. Hull temperature climbing. But we're not moving. In the council chamber, Nextel watched in amazement as the humans coordinated their efforts without any central authority, each ship adapting independently while working in perfect concert with the others. Hours later, when the storm finally passed, the human ships were scorched and damaged, their hulls bearing the scars of their stand against the star itself. But the habitation rings were intact, and not a single life was lost. As repair crews swarmed the damaged vessels, Captain Chen received a priority message from Earth. She expected a reprimand for acting without authorization. Instead, she found a list of every human ship in the sector, all volunteering to help with the recovery efforts. "Send them our coordinates," she told her communications officer, a tired smile crossing her face. "Looks like we've got more work to do." Junior researcher Zuri sat in her private quarters aboard the Truth Seeker, her sensory tendrils coiled tightly against her body as she reviewed the footage for the 100th time. The human ship's defense of the habitation rings played on one screen while her original research data filled 3 others. Her third heart began its stress rhythm as she overlaid the timestamps. During the exact period when Dr. Kvix claimed humans were exhibiting dangerous individualistic behavior, her observations showed something entirely different. She had recorded thousands of instances of humans helping each other, emergency services rushing into danger, global relief efforts, stranger helping stranger. A soft chime announced an incoming transmission. Zeri quickly minimized her screens, but relaxed when she saw it was from Lyra, the Maraxian medical officer she befriended after the quantum core incident. "Have you seen the latest from the habitation rings?" Lyra asked without preamble, her 4 eyes bright with excitement. "The humans didn't just save everyone. They're staying to help with repairs. They're treating it like some kind of community project. They're calling it a space barn raising, whatever that means." Zeri's tendrils unknotted slightly. "Lyra, I need your help. Can you send me your complete sensor logs from when the human ships helped you, including all behavioral data?" "Of course. But why?" "Please," Zuri interrupted, her tone carrying an urgency that made Lyra's secondary heart skip. "It's important." As soon as the Maraxian data arrived, Zeri began her analysis. The pieces were falling into place. Dr. Kvix's report had used selective editing so subtle that even the Galactic Council's fact-checkers had missed it. He had taken footage of human emergency responses and reframed them as chaotic behavior. Scenes of humans rushing into danger to help others were labeled as reckless individualism. Her door chime sounded. "Enter," she called, quickly saving her work to a secure data crystal. Dr. Kvix himself glided in, his senior researcher robes immaculate as always. "Ah, Zeri, still analyzing the human response to the solar storm. Fascinating display of their chaotic nature, wasn't it?" "Actually, sir," Zeri straightened her posture, all 4 of her hearts pounding. "I've been reviewing our original research. All of it." Kvix's primary tendrils twitched. "There's no need. My report was quite thorough." "Like how thorough you were in editing out the human emergency services." Zari projected an original footage stream onto her main screen. "Or how you removed every instance of their relief efforts." "You don't understand." Kvix's color patterns shifted to warning hues. "The Scatheri have spent centuries building our reputation as the galaxy's humanitarian leaders. When we discovered humans, their natural tendency to help others threatened everything we'd worked for. Their chaotic, unstructured assistance makes our carefully organized aid programs look less impressive." Zori completed, her tendrils fully extended now in a stance of challenge. "So you deliberately misrepresented them to the Council." "I presented the facts in a way that protected our cultural heritage," Kvix countered. "The Scatheri way is about order, structure, proper procedures. The Scatheri way is about truth," Zari cut in. She initiated a data transfer to the Galactic Council's secure channel. "That's why I'm sending them everything. The original footage, the edited versions, the timestamps showing deliberate manipulation. Even this conversation." Kvix's colors paled. "You cannot. My reputation is worth less than the truth," Zeri finished, "and worth far less than the lives that could have been lost if humans had followed our warnings and stayed away when they were needed." As Kvix fled her quarters, Zuri received another transmission from Lyra. More human ships had arrived at the habitation rings. They were organizing repair teams, sharing resources, teaching local engineers their shield modification techniques. Zuri added this new footage to her report. Let the Council see humans as they truly were, not as threats to anyone's reputation or status, but as beings who helped simply because they could, because that's what humans did. And maybe, she reflected as she authorized the final data transfer, it's what this Cathari could learn to do too. The Grand Council chamber had never been so silent. The holographic displays showed Zuri's unedited footage in its entirety. Hours of human emergency responses, disaster relief efforts, and spontaneous acts of assistance. Chief Administrator Mextel's crystalline form remained still, absorbing every detail. Researcher Zuri. Mextel's voice resonated through the chamber. Your evidence is overwhelming. We owe humanity a profound apology. Zuri stood before the council, her tendrils relaxed for the first time in days. Beside her, Captain Sarah Chen of the Hope's Horizon watched the proceedings with quiet attention. The human captain had been invited to represent Earth's interests during this historic session. However, Mextel continued, these revelations raised disturbing questions, not just about the Cathari deception, but about our own protocols. The administrator's crystal matrix pulsed with new colors. During the solar storm crisis, human ships acted without authorization, ignored standard procedures, and took tremendous risks. And in doing so, they saved millions of lives. The chamber erupted in discussion. A Pleiadian representative rose, their bioluminescence bright with emotion. The humans' methods during the evacuation defied all established protocols. Each ship acted independently, yet somehow maintained perfect coordination. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Because we didn't have time for protocols. Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. In a crisis, every second spent waiting for authorization costs lives. My crew knows this. Every human ship knows this. We act first and file the paperwork later. Precisely. Mextel's colors shifted to decision patterns. And that is what we must learn from humanity. Their greatest strength isn't their technology or their resources. It's their ability to act decisively while working together. Each human ship during the crisis made independent decisions while supporting the others. No central authority, no approval chain, just immediate action. The Council's historians began recording as Mextel outlined a series of radical changes. Emergency protocols would be streamlined. Ships of all species would be empowered to render immediate assistance. The emphasis would shift from proper procedures to practical results. In the observation gallery, Lyra watched with all four eyes wide. The Maraxian medical officer had been invited as a witness, along with representatives from dozens of species who had experienced human assistance firsthand. Each had their own story of how humans had helped them without hesitation or expectation of reward. There's more. Zuri stepped forward, her research tendrils extended. The human concept of paying it forward. It's spreading. The Centaurian fleet has already modified their patrol routes to include wellness checks, just like human ships do. The Aldebarans are establishing their own emergency response teams based on human models. Even some young Cathari are volunteering for immediate disaster response training. Sarah smiled at this. Her crew had been teaching emergency response techniques to anyone who wanted to learn. The Hope's Horizon had become a floating classroom between missions, with engineers and medics from a dozen species learning human methods of rapid response and adaptation. Which brings us to our next decision, Mextel announced. We propose the establishment of a new emergency response network, not controlled by the Council, but coordinated between all willing species, a system that combines human adaptability with the unique strengths of each civilization. The chamber's holographic displays shifted, showing a map of known space. Points of light indicated every registered ship that had volunteered for the new network. The number was staggering. Thousands of vessels from hundreds of species, ready to help anyone in need. We were wrong about humanity, Mextol concluded. We saw their independence as a weakness, their emotional responses as a flaw. Instead, they have shown us a better way. Not through rigid structures or careful protocols, but through immediate action and genuine care for others. Sarah stood a little straighter, feeling the weight of the moment. We're not special, she said simply. We just believe that helping others is the right thing to do. And it seems we're not the only ones who think that way. As if to prove her point, an emergency signal flashed on the chamber screens. A transport was in trouble near the outer rim. Before the council could respond, ships of 6 different species were already changing course to help. Not because they had to, not because it was protocol, but because that's what people did when others needed help, no matter what species they happened to be. The Earth-designed Emergency Response Center floated serenely in orbit around Proxima Centauri, its crystalline observation dome reflecting starlight in patterns that pleased both human and alien aesthetics. Inside, Zeri stood before the main control center, her research tendrils moving gracefully across the holographic displays as she monitored rescue operations across 3 sectors. 1 year had passed since the Council's historic decision, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The young Scatheri scientist now led the Joint Species Emergency Response Initiative, or JSERI, a position that would have been unthinkable in the old days of rigid hierarchies. Incoming priority signal, announced Lyra from her medical coordination station. The Meraxian's 4 eyes focused on the data stream. Passenger liner reporting engine troubles in the outer rim. 200 civilians aboard. Zeri's tendrils flowed through the sector data. Nearest vessels. 3 ships already responding. Lyra reported with a smile. The human vessel Star Shepherd, a Scatheri research ship New Horizon. And this is interesting. The Healing Light. Zeri recognized the name. It was Lyra's old ship, now part of the Rapid Response Fleet. On the main screen, she watched the 3 vessels converge on the liner's position. No hesitation, no bureaucratic delays, just immediate action. Captain Sarah Chen's voice came through the comm system. She had been appointed as humanity's representative to JSERI's advisory board, though she still preferred active duty on the Hope's horizon. Zari, just finished reviewing your proposal for the new training program. The combination of Scatheri analytical methods with human practical exercises is brilliant. When can we start? The first class begins next week, Zeri replied, watching as the rescue ships reached the liner. We have students from 12 species enrolled. Even Dr. Kvix has volunteered to teach the theoretical components. That had been an unexpected development. After the scandal of his deception, Kvix had resigned his position in shame. But months of watching humans work alongside his people had transformed him. He now dedicated himself to understanding and teaching what he once feared: the art of immediate practical assistance. The main screen showed the rescue in progress. The human ship provided power support, while the Scatheri vessel used its advanced sensors to diagnose the engine problem. The Healing Light stood ready to receive passengers if evacuation became necessary. 3 species working in perfect concert, each contributing their unique strengths. Director Zeri, a young Scatheri aide, approached, offering a data crystal, the latest statistics from the network. The numbers were remarkable. Emergency response times had decreased by 60%. Survival rates in crisis situations had nearly doubled. But more impressive were the cultural changes. Species that had once been rigidly isolated now worked together regularly. Knowledge and resources were shared freely. New emergency signal, Lyra announced. But it's different. A Danibian colony is requesting assistance with a planetary engineering project. Not an emergency, they just need help. Zeri felt her heart's warm. This too had become common. Species reaching out for help before situations became critical, knowing they would be met with willing assistance rather than bureaucratic procedures. I remember, Sarah's voice carried a smile, when we were told humans wouldn't assist. That we were too individualistic, too chaotic to work with others. Now look at us, all of us. The observation dome's transparent sections offered a view of nearby space, where ships of various species went about their duties. Many bore the distinctive blue stripe that marked them as emergency response vessels. Each had a unique story of lives saved, help given, and bonds formed. On the wall of the control center, a simple plaque bore the words that had become JSERI's unofficial motto: "In space, no one succeeds alone." Below it, in smaller text, "Dedicated to those who teach us that helping others is never a sign of weakness, but the greatest strength we possess." Zeri's tendrils moved through the sector data one last time before her shift ended. Somewhere out there, another call for help would come, and when it did, someone would answer. Not because of protocols or regulations, but because that's what people did. After all, she reflected, watching the stars shine through the dome, that's what humans had taught them, and some lessons were too valuable to forget.